Myanmar, a country that once held promise for democracy in Southeast Asia, is now facing a terrible crisis. The military takeover in February 2021 shattered the country's delicate move towards democracy, leading to violence, oppression, and widespread suffering. The military's harsh actions against anyone who disagrees with them have resulted in terrible acts, including unlawful killings, torture, unfair arrests, and people disappearing. Things have gotten even worse since July 2023, with the military increasing its attacks on civilians, especially in areas where ethnic minorities live. Countries around the world have spoken out against the takeover and the violence, but their words haven't stopped the military. Meanwhile, the people of Myanmar are going through unimaginable hardship. Millions have lost their homes and are seeking safety in neighboring countries or elsewhere within Myanmar. The healthcare system is close to collapsing, and the economy is in ruins. The crisis in Myanmar is not just a tragedy for its people, it's also a threat to stability in the region. The world needs to take real and coordinated action to force the military to stop the violence, bring back democracy, and respect the rights of all its citizens. The human suffering caused by the conflict in Myanmar is a catastrophe. The United Nations estimates that over 3 million people have been forced from their homes since the coup, many living in temporary camps or remote border areas. These displaced communities often lack basic things like food, water, shelter, and medical care, making them very vulnerable to sickness and hunger. The military's deliberate attacks on healthcare workers and hospitals have made the humanitarian crisis even worse. Hospitals and clinics have been bombed, robbed, or taken over by the military, making it very hard for people to get medical help. The COVID-19 pandemic has also caused huge problems for the country's weak healthcare system, pushing it to the point of collapse. It's been difficult for the world to provide enough help to those in need, because the military is restricting access and harassing aid workers. Many international organizations have had to reduce their work, leaving millions of vulnerable people without essential aid. It's also hard to know exactly how bad the crisis is, because aid workers can't reach many areas, meaning the situation is likely much worse than we currently understand. The Rohingya, a Muslim minority group in Myanmar, have suffered from discrimination and mistreatment for decades, a situation the UN has called a clear example of ethnic cleansing. The military's crackdown in 2017 in Rakhine State forced over 740,000 Rohingya to flee to neighboring Bangladesh, where they now live in crowded and unsanitary refugee camps. The Rohingya still in Myanmar face severe restrictions on their freedom of movement, access to education, healthcare, and jobs. They are practically denied citizenship and live in constant fear of violence and unfair arrest. The military takeover has made their situation even worse, with reports of increased attacks, unlawful killings, and forced labor. The world's response to the Rohingya crisis has been widely criticized as not being enough. While there has been some progress in holding those responsible for these crimes accountable, much more needs to be done to address the root causes of the crisis, including the fact that the Rohingya are stateless and the Myanmar military has not been punished for its actions. The conflict in Myanmar is a terrible cycle of violence and people being forced from their homes. The military's attacks on civilians, including airstrikes, shelling, and setting fire to buildings, have forced millions to flee in search of safety. These attacks often target villages believed to be helping opposition fighters or the resistance movement. The displacement of civilians has created a massive humanitarian crisis, as people are forced to live in crowded and unhealthy conditions, often without basic necessities. This displacement also causes long-term problems, as it disrupts jobs, education, and communities, making it hard for people to recover and rebuild. The military's scorched earth tactics, destroying homes, crops, and livestock, have made the humanitarian crisis even worse. These tactics are meant to punish communities seen as supporting the resistance and to prevent displaced people from returning home. The world's response to the crisis in Myanmar has been marked by a lack of unity and decisive action. While many countries have condemned the coup and placed sanctions on the military and its leaders, these measures haven't stopped the military's brutal crackdown. The Association of Southeast Asian Nations, or ASEAN, which Myanmar is a member of, has been criticized for not taking action and for failing to hold the military accountable to the 5-point consensus, a peace plan agreed upon in April 2021. ASEAN's weak response has encouraged the military and allowed the crisis to get worse. The United Nations Security Council is also divided on how to deal with the situation. China and Russia, both powerful members of the Security Council, have blocked attempts to stop weapons from being sold to Myanmar and to bring the situation before the International Criminal Court. The terrible acts committed by the Myanmar military since the coup are crimes against humanity and possibly even genocide. It is crucial that those responsible are held accountable and brought to justice. The international community must support efforts to gather evidence of human rights abuses and build legal cases against those responsible. This includes supporting the work of the UN Independent Investigative Mechanism for Myanmar and other international justice groups. There also needs to be a coordinated international response to pressure the military to cooperate with international courts. This includes sanctions on individuals and groups involved in human rights violations, as well as suspending Myanmar from international organizations. Dealing with the complex crisis in Myanmar requires a comprehensive and ongoing effort from the international community. While there are no easy answers, several key steps can be taken to help the people of Myanmar promote accountability and create a path towards a peaceful and democratic future. First, the international community must prioritize providing humanitarian assistance to those in need, both inside Myanmar and in neighboring countries hosting refugees. This requires more money for aid organizations and diplomatic pressure on the military to allow access to conflict zones. Second, the international community must keep pressuring the military to end the violence, release all political prisoners, and engage in serious dialogue with the democratic opposition. This includes enforcing existing sanctions, considering new sanctions, and supporting the efforts of ASEAN and the UN to find a peaceful solution. Finally, the international community must work to ensure accountability for the crimes committed in Myanmar. This includes supporting the work of the International Criminal Court and other international justice systems, as well as exploring other ways to hold people accountable, such as universal jurisdiction.